endeavoured to get some of the broth into her mouth, and, as he said, got 2 or 3 spoonfuls down, though I question whether he could be sure of it or not; but it was too late, and she died the same night. The youth, who was preserved at the price of his most affectionate mother's life, was not so far gone, yet he lay in a cabin bed, as one stretched out, with hardly any life left in him. He had a piece of an old glove in his mouth, having eaten up the rest of it; however, being young, and having more strength than his mother, the mate got something down his throat, and he began sensibly to revive, though, by giving him some time after but 2 or 3 spoonfuls extraordinary, he was very sick, and brought it up again. But the next care was the poor maid. She lay all along upon the deck, hard by her mistress, and just like one that had fallen down in a fit of apoplexy, and struggled for life. Her limbs were distorted, one of her hands was clasped round the frame of the chair, and she gripped it so hard that we could not easily make her let it go; her other arm lay over her head, and her feet lay both together, set fast against the frame of the cabin table; in short, she lay just like one in the agonies of death, and yet she was alive too. The poor creature was not only starved with hunger, and terrified with the thoughts of death, but, as the men told us afterward, was broken hearted for her mistress, whom she saw dying for 2 or 3 days before, and whom she loved most tenderly. We knew not what to do with this poor girl; for when our surgeon, who was a man of very great knowledge and experience, had, with great application, recovered her as to life, he had her upon his hands still, for she was little less than distracted for a considerable time after. Whoever shall read these memorandums must be desired to consider that visits at sea are not like a journey into the country, where sometimes people stay a week or a fortnight at a place. Our business was to relieve this distressed ship's crew, but not lie by for them; and though they were willing to steer the same course with us for some days, yet we could carry no sail to keep pace with a ship that had no masts. However, as their captain begged of us to help him to set up a main topmast and a kind of a topmast to his jury foremast, we did, as it were, lie by him for 3 or 4 days; and then, having given him 5 barrels of beef, a barrel of pork, 2 hogsheads of biscuit, and a proportion of peas, flour, and what other things we could spare, and taking 3 casks of sugar, some rum, and some pieces of 8 from them for satisfaction, we left them, taking on board with us, at their own earnest request, the youth and the maid, and all their goods. The young lad was about 17 years of age, a pretty, well bred, modest, and sensible youth, greatly dejected with the loss of his mother, and also at having lost his father but a few months before, at Barbadoes. He begged of the surgeon to speak to me to take him out of the ship, for he said that the cruel fellows had murdered his mother; and indeed so they had, that is to say, passively, for they might have spared a small sustenance to the poor helpless widow, though it had been but just enough to keep her alive; but hunger knows no friend, no relation, no justice, no right, and therefore is remorseless, and capable of no compassion. The surgeon told him how far we were going, and that it would carry him away from all his friends, and put him, perhaps, in as bad circumstances almost as those we found him in, that is to say, starving in the world. He said it mattered not whither he went, if he was but delivered from the terrible crew that he was among; that the captain, by which he meant me, for he could know nothing of my nephew, had saved his life, and he was sure would not hurt him; and as for the maid, he was sure, if she came to herself, she would be very thankful for it, and let us carry them where we would. The surgeon represented the case so affectionately to me that I yielded, and we took them both on board, with all their goods, except 11 hogsheads of sugar, which could not be removed or come at; and as the youth had a bill of lading for them, I made his commander sign a writing, obliging himself to go, as soon as he came to Bristol, to one Mr. Rogers, a merchant there, to whom the youth said he was related, and to deliver a letter which I wrote to him, and all the goods he had belonging to the deceased widow; which, I suppose, was not done, for I could never learn that the ship came to Bristol, but was, as is most probable, lost at sea, being in so disabled a condition, and so far from any land, that I am of opinion the first storm she met with afterwards she might founder, for she was leaky, and had damage in her hold when we met with her. I was now in the latitude of 19 degrees 32 minutes, and had hitherto a tolerable voyage as to weather, though at first the winds had been contrary. I shall trouble nobody with the little incidents of wind, weather, currents, etc., on the rest of our voyage; but to shorten my story, shall observe that I came to my old habitation, the island, on the 10th of April, 1695. It was with no small difficulty that I found the place; for as I came to it, and went to it before on the south and east side of the island, coming from the Brazils, so now, coming in between the main and the island, and having no chart for the coast, nor any landmark, I did not know it when I saw it, or know whether I saw it or not. We beat about a great while, and went on shore several islands in the mouth of the great river Orinoco, but none for my purpose; only this I learned by my coasting the shore, that I was under one great mistake before, viz., that the continent which I thought I saw from the island I lived in was really no continent, but a long island, or rather a ridge of islands, reaching from one to the other side of the extended mouth of that great river; and that the savages who came to my island were not properly those which we call Caribbees, but islanders, and other barbarians of the same kind, who inhabited nearer to our side than the rest. In short, I visited several of these islands to no purpose: some I found were inhabited, and some were not. On one of them I found some Spaniards, and thought they had lived there, but speaking with them, found they had a sloop lying in a small creek hard by, and came thither to make salt, and to catch some pearl mussels if they could, but that they belonged to the Isle de Trinidad, which lay farther south, in the latitude of 10 and 11 degrees. Thus coasting from one island to another, sometimes with the ship, sometimes with the Frenchmen's shallop, which we had found a convenient boat, and therefore kept her with their very good will, at length I came fair on the south side of my island, and presently knew the very countenance of the place; so I brought the ship safe to an anchor, broadside with the little creek where my old habitation was. As soon as I saw the place, I called for Friday, and asked him if he knew where he was. He looked about a little, and presently clapping his hands, cried, "Oh yes, oh there! oh yes, oh there!" pointing to our old habitation, and fell dancing and capering like a mad fellow; and I had much ado to keep him from jumping into the sea to swim ashore to the place. "Well, Friday," says I, "do you think we shall find anybody here, or no? And do you think we shall see your father?" The fellow stood mute as a stock a good while; but when I named his father, the poor affectionate creature looked dejected, and I could see the tears run down his face very plentifully. "What is the matter, Friday? Are you troubled because you may see your father?" "No, no," says he, shaking his head, "no see him more; no, never more see him again." "Why so, Friday? How do you know that?" "Oh no," says Friday, "he long ago die, long ago; he much old man." "Well, well, Friday, you don't know; but shall we see any one else then?" The fellow, it seems, had better eyes than I, and he points to the hill just above my old house, and though we lay half a league off, he cries out, we see, yes, we see much man there, and there, and there." I looked, but I saw nobody; no, not with a perspective glass, which was, I suppose, because I could not hit the place; for the fellow was right, as I found upon inquiry the next day, and there were 5 or 6 men all together, who stood to look at the ship, not knowing what to think of us. As soon as Friday told me he saw people, I caused the English ancient to be spread, and fired 3 guns, to give them notice we were friends; and in about a quarter of an hour after we perceived a smoke arise from the side of the creek: so I immediately ordered the boat out, taking Friday with me, and hanging out a white flag, I went directly on shore, taking with me the young friar I mentioned, to whom I had told the story of my living there, and the manner of it,